It was a hot afternoon. The sun glared mercilessly over the concrete streets as people rushed about their day. Among them walked a woman, simple, quiet, almost invisible. Her name was Zoya. She wore an old, faded kurta and a pair of worn sandals. Her dupatta was frayed at the edges. There was nothing luxurious about her appearance. To the world, she looked like just another middle-class woman running errands. But Zoya had a mission today. She had promised herself that she would surprise her husband with something special. His dream car. He had never asked for much. Despite being a wealthy man, he lived modestly. But Zoya knew he always admired the classic beauty of a Rolls-Royce. She had done her research, studied models, compared features, and prepared herself to visit one of the most high-end car dealerships in the city. As she pushed open the glass door of the showroom, the cold air hit her like a wall. Every surface gleamed: chrome, glass, polished marble. The place was silent, intimidating. Salesmen in designer suits stood with slicked-back hair and smug smiles. Zoya walked in slowly, hesitant but hopeful. "Excuse me," she said politely to the man at the front desk. "I'd like to see your Rolls-Royce collection." The man looked up from his phone, scanned her from head to toe, then smirked. "Madam, these are not display items. We only entertain serious buyers," he said curtly. "I am a serious buyer," she replied, trying to sound firm. Another salesman nearby chuckled. "Maybe she's lost." "Ma'am, we don't do tours for window shoppers," he sneered. Zoya felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but she didn't back down. "I'm here to inquire about purchasing. I just want to." The first man cut her off. "Ma'am, please leave. We don't want to waste our time. You can try the used car lot down the street." Zoya stood there, silent for a moment, her dignity stung. The room had grown colder. Others in the showroom were watching now. Some whispered. Some laughed under their breath. Feeling small, humiliated, and disrespected, she turned and walked out. Her sandals slapped quietly against the marble floor as she left the building. Outside, she took a deep breath. The heat didn't bother her anymore. Her pride did. But she didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply walked away. That night, she told her husband nothing. He noticed she was quiet but didn't press. She smiled and served dinner, just as she always did. The next morning, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly turned onto the same street as that dealership. Its polished frame reflected the sunlight like a mirror. The driver stepped out first and opened the passenger door. From the back seat stepped Zoya, this time in the same simple clothes. Heads turned. The salesman inside the showroom rushed to the windows. One of them whispered, "Is that her?" Zoya walked in calmly. The same man who mocked her yesterday stood frozen. He stammered, Madam, I'm so sorry. We didn't realize." She held up her hand. "I'm not here for apologies." The manager rushed over. "Ma'am, we'll show you everything. The finest models, champagne, anything you like." "I don't want champagne," Zoya said quietly. "I want to see the face of a man who thinks someone's bank account depends on their clothes." Silence. "I came here yesterday to surprise my husband. You judged me. You disrespected me. But you see, I wasn't alone. I came carrying the dignity of every woman who's ever been dismissed because she didn't look rich enough." The manager looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. She paused. "I already bought the car. From another dealership. One where I was treated like a human being." With that, she turned and left. The same driver opened the door. She sat inside. The engine purred like a cat. And just before the door closed, she looked at the stunned men and gave them a calm, knowing smile. That day, they didn't lose a sale. They lost their illusion of who matters. Back home, her husband stood at the gate, shocked and speechless as the Rolls-Royce pulled up. He laughed, confused, then cried, "Zoya, what is this?" She stepped out, smiling. "A gift. For the man who always gave me everything." even when we had nothing. And as he hugged her, eyes brimming with love and disbelief, Zoya felt no pride in the car, or the price, or the power. She felt pride in who she had become, a woman no longer afraid of how the world saw her. Her husband, Samir, was still in shock. His hands ran over the sleek black surface of the car, his fingers trembling. "Zoya, how did you do this?" She smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "It doesn't matter how. What matters is why." He looked at her, puzzled. "You've always stood by me, Samir. When we had nothing, when the world turned its back on you after your business failed, you never let me feel the weight of poverty. You worked as a consultant quietly, rebuilding from scratch. Every time you saw a Rolls-Royce pass by, your eyes sparkled, but you never said a word." Samir's throat tightened. "I never wanted this. I only wanted peace." "I know," she whispered. "And that's why you deserve it even more." Inside the house, Samir turned to her, holding her face gently. "But what made you go through all this?" Zoya paused. Her smile faded. "I was humiliated yesterday," she said, her voice soft but steady. "They threw me out like garbage. They looked at me as if I was dirt. And for a moment, I almost believed them. Almost." Samir clenched his jaw. "Who? What happened?" She sat down on the sofa, looking out the window. "A car dealership. The kind where men in sharp suits decide who deserves respect based on a handbag or a pair of heels." Samir's eyes darkened. "You should have told me." She turned to him. "No. That's the old me. The one who'd hide behind your name when the world got cruel. I don't need you to fight alone." "I didn't," she interrupted, placing her hand on his. "I fought with every memory of how you treated me, with kindness, with dignity, even when we lived in a single room without power. I fought with that strength." Samir looked down. "I failed you. I should have done more." Zoya shook her head. "No. You taught me that value doesn't come from the price tag you wear. But sometimes, the world needs a reminder." She stood up, walked over to the window, and gazed at the car in the driveway. They didn't see a woman who had gone through sleepless nights, late-night study sessions, quiet sacrifices. They saw worn sandals and a simple dress. And they thought that meant I had no worth. Her voice wavered. But they forgot. True wealth doesn't announce itself. It walks in quietly. And sometimes, it walks in wearing a kurta. Samir came behind her, wrapping his arms around her. "You've always been richer than anyone I've ever met." She leaned into him. "Now I know that too." But the story didn't stop there. Later that week, Zoya received a call. It was from the manager of that dealership. "Ma'am," he said nervously, "we've reevaluated some of our policies. We'd be honored if you'd consider consulting with us to improve our customer experience, especially for women." Zoya smiled faintly. "I'm not an image consultant. We understand, but the way you handled what happened, many of our staff have expressed guilt, and even admiration. We'd like to sponsor a training program. Perhaps a campaign on dignity in customer service. With your story, if you'll allow us." Zoya paused. "If I agree, it's not for your dealership's reputation. It's for the girls who walk in next time wearing their father's shoes or their mother's shawl, hoping to buy something with the money they earned with their own hands." "Yes, ma'am," he replied softly. That call planted a seed. Soon, Zoya found herself on stages she never imagined, speaking to students, employees, and even corporate leaders. Her story spread, not for the car, but for the courage. They called her the Quiet Storm. She wore the same simple clothes, tied her hair back the same way, and walked with the same grace. But now, when she entered a room, people stood. Not because of her husband. Not because of the Rolls-Royce. But because Zoya had become something rarer than wealth. She had become a symbol. A woman who walked into judgment and left with her head high. Not by shouting, not by arguing, but by proving that dignity is louder than diamonds. And those who once dismissed her? They now trained under the programs she led. One day, a young girl approached her after a talk at a university. "Ma'am," she said shyly, "is it true you were kicked out of a dealership?" Zoya smiled. "Yes. And then you went back, in a Rolls-Royce?" She chuckled softly. "That part's true. But that's not the important bit." "What is?" the girl asked. Zoya leaned down and said gently, "I went back, as myself." Zoya's world was changing. Slowly at first. But change, once begun, has its own momentum. One story led to another. A news article followed. Then a short TV segment. A business magazine interviewed her, the woman who taught a luxury brand a lesson in humility. And while the headlines were flattering, Zoya kept her focus away from fame. She didn't crave the spotlight. But she saw in it an opportunity. In one of her talks, a girl in the audience stood up and said, "I work in retail. Customers yell at me every day. My manager says it's part of the job. Is it?" Zoya's answer came after a long pause. "No, it's not." That single response started something unexpected. She went home that night and couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the girl's face, her shaking voice, and the years Zoya herself had stayed silent when mistreated. The next day, she registered a foundation. Osman. It meant sky. Because every woman deserved to rise, to stretch, to soar. Through Osman, Zoya began offering training workshops, not just for sales staff, but for women from low-income areas who wanted to start businesses, learn soft skills, build confidence. She remembered the young girl she used to be, the one who didn't know how to speak up, who thought being humble meant being invisible. No more. Her first community center opened in a cramped basement in Karachi. The walls were damp, the ceiling low, but the energy inside? Electric. Women sat on plastic chairs, notebooks on their laps, eyes shining with curiosity. Some were mothers, some teenagers, some domestic workers. Zoya stood before them, her voice calm but clear. "I was told I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong. But belonging isn't given. You take it. You walk into spaces like you deserve to be there. Because you do." Applause didn't follow. Silence did. The kind of silence where truth hits bone. Weeks turned into months. Osman grew. Zoya's name became a whisper passed through sewing rooms, markets, taxi stops, and WhatsApp groups. Go to her. She'll help. She doesn't judge. She was one of us. But not everyone was happy. As Osman gained support, so did the criticism. A powerful businessman, owner of the dealership that had once thrown her out, mocked her initiative at a gala dinner. She was poor. Got lucky. Now she thinks she's a hero, he scoffed. Zoya was there. She heard him. And she smiled. Later that evening, during her speech, she said nothing of it directly. But her words were a blade wrapped in silk. "Some people think power comes from money," she said, voice steady, eyes scanning the crowd. "But real power is when you walk into a room and know that you don't need to prove anything." The room went still. The man lowered his glass. She had said enough. One evening, Samir came home to find Zoya sitting in the dark, surrounded by notebooks, papers, photos of women who had graduated from Osman's programs. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" She looked up, her voice soft. "I used to believe the Rolls-Royce was the climax of my story. That walking back into that showroom proved I'd made it." "It didn't?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. That was just the beginning." She paused. "The real story is here. In these lives. In these women who were told they were nothing, until they believed they were everything." Samir sat beside her. "And you," he said gently. "You showed them that." Zoya smiled. "No. I just reminded them." Her next goal was bigger. Osman was expanding into rural Pakistan, into villages where women had never stepped foot in a bank, never been taught how to read a contract, never been asked what they dreamed of becoming. She rode in buses, in jeeps, crossed dusty roads and muddy lanes. She sat on charpoys under mango trees, sipping tea with village elders, listening, learning. And she never wore designer clothes. Never arrived with an entourage. She showed up exactly as she was. One day, a girl in a small village stood beside her and asked, "Baji, can someone like me drive a car like yours?" Zoya laughed. "You don't need a car like mine." "But I want one," the girl insisted. Zoya leaned down. "Then promise me something. When you get it, take someone for a ride who's been told they don't belong." The girl grinned. "Deal." And in that moment, Zoya knew. It was never about revenge. It was never about showing off. It was always about lifting the next one up. Zoya, now older, sits beneath a neem tree outside the center. She wears the same simple clothes, a light shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair is streaked with silver. In her lap is a notebook full of scribbles, ideas, dreams, the next step. A shadow falls across her. She looks up. A little girl stands before her, wide-eyed, nervous. "Are you Zoya Baji?" Zoya smiles. "Yes. I want to be like you one day." Zoya closes her notebook, eyes full of warmth. She places a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "No," she whispers. "Be better than me." The camera pulls back slowly, wide aerial shot. The Rolls-Royce sits in the background, parked silently beside a rickshaw and two bicycles. It doesn't shine. It doesn't matter anymore. Because now, Zoya is driving lives, not just cars. Fade to black. Soft music plays. Text on screen. Dignity is not worn. It's lived.